In part 1, we saw Joan rise from peasant to legend. A girl who heard voices and saved France. In part 2, we watched her fall. Betrayed by the king she's crowned. Sold to her enemies. Condemned in a rigged trial. Now comes the end. May 30, 1431. Joan of Arc, 19 years old, is about to be burned alive in front of thousands. But what happened that day was so disturbing, so impossible to explain, that even the executioner fled in terror. This is part 3, the final chapter, the burning, and I promise you, this is not how you think this story ends. The morning of May 30, 1431, Joan of Arc wakes up in her cell in Rouen Cast, knowing she has hours to live. She's been sentenced to death by burning, one of the most agonizing executions imaginable. The church reserves it for the worst heretics and witches. It's designed to be slow, painful, public. A priest comes to hear her final confession. Joan asks him one question: am I going to heaven or hell? The priest doesn't answer. How could he? The church just condemned her as a heretic. Officially, she's damned. But Joan isn't asking because she's afraid. She's asking because after everything, the voices, the victories, the betrayal, the trial, she still believes God is with her. I have done what he asked of me, she says. If I burn, it is his will. At 9 in the morning, they come for her. She's dressed in a long white shift, the garment of a condemned heretic. They place a tall paper cap on her head with the words, heretic, relapsed, apostate, idolater, written in black ink. She's paraded through the streets of Rouen in a cart. Thousands line the roads. Some jeer, some weep, most just stare in silence at the girl who was once called a saint. When the cart reaches the old market square, Joan sees it, the execution platform. A tall wooden stake rising from a massive pile of wood and kindling. This is where she will die. But here's where the story takes its first strange turn. The executioner, a man named Geoffroy Terrage, approaches Joan before she's tied to the stake. According to multiple witnesses, he's visibly shaken. "Forgive me," he whispers to her. "I am only following orders." Joan looks at him with calm, steady eyes. "Do what you must," she says. "This is not your fault. You are only an instrument." Terrage later testified that in that moment, he felt a wave of dread. He'd executed dozens of people before. Criminals, traitors, heretics. He'd never felt anything for them. But looking at Joan, he felt something he'd never experienced, the absolute certainty that he was about to murder an innocent person. And worse, that something terrible was going to happen. They tied Joan to the stake. Her hands are bound behind her back. Her feet are chained. An English soldier places a crude wooden cross in her bound hands. Joan clutches it, whispering prayers. A Dominican friar named Martin Ladvenu stands near the platform, holding a larger crucifix high so Joan can see it as she dies. He's weeping openly. The crowd is massive now. Estimates say between 10,000 and 20,000 people. English soldiers, French citizens, church officials, everyone wants to see the end of the Maid of Orléans. At around noon, the executioner lights the fire. The flames catch quickly. The kindling crackles. Smoke rises. Joan begins to pray aloud. Her voice is strong at first. Jesus. 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 The smoke thickens. The heat intensifies. The crowd watches in horrible silence. And then, something goes wrong. The fire is burning too slowly. See, executions by burning were usually designed to kill the victim quickly through smoke inhalation. The flames would surround the person, the smoke would choke them unconscious, and they'd die before the worst pain began. But someone, we don't know if it was intentional or incompetence, built Joan's pyre wrong. The platform was too high. The flames couldn't reach her body quickly. She was burning slowly, consciously, fully aware. For nearly 10 minutes, Joan screams. She calls out for Jesus. She begs for water. She cries for the crucifix. The crowd begins to panic. Some people vomit, others flee. Even the English soldiers, men who'd seen countless horrors in war, turn away. Friar Martin Ladvenu, still holding the crucifix, is sobbing uncontrollably. He later testified, "I have never seen anyone die with such faith and courage. She was innocent. God help us, we burned a saint." The executioner, Terrage, is ordered to add more wood to make the fire burn hotter, to end her suffering. But when he approaches the pyre to push the flames closer, something happens that he will never forget. Geoffroy Terrage, the executioner, throws more wood onto the fire. The flames roar higher. The heat becomes unbearable. Joan's screaming finally stops. The crowd assumes she's dead. Some cross themselves. Some celebrate. Most just want to leave and forget what they've witnessed. But the executioner's job isn't finished yet. In cases of heresy, the church demands proof of death. The body must be burned completely. No remains. No relics. Nothing for followers to worship. So Terrage waits for the flames to die down. Then he approaches the smoldering pyre to inspect the body. And that's when he sees something that will haunt him for the rest of his life. Joan's body has been almost entirely consumed by the fire. Her flesh is gone. Her bones are charred. Everything has burned, except for one thing. Her heart. It's still intact, sitting in the ashes, completely untouched by the flames. Terrage stares at it in disbelief. This is impossible. The fire burned hot enough to consume bone, but the heart, an organ that should burn easily, remains whole. He immediately reports this to his supervisors. The English commanders are furious. This cannot get out. If people believe her heart survived, they'll call it a miracle. They'll say God protected her. Everything they did, the trial, the execution, the condemnation, will be for nothing. So they order Terrage to burn the body again. He rebuilds the pyre, adds more wood, more fuel. He lights it and lets it burn for hours. When the flames finally die, he returns. The heart is still there. Now Terrage is terrified. He's not a religious man. He's an executioner. He's seen death in every form. But this is beyond nature, beyond explanation. The English order him to try one more time. So he builds the fire a third time. He uses oil, sulfur, everything that burns the hottest. He lights it and steps back, praying to God for the first time in years. The flames consume everything, the wood, the ash, the bones, and when it finally burns out, Joan's heart is gone. But here's what makes this story even more disturbing. The executioner, Geoffroy Terrage, goes to a priest immediately after and confesses. He's convinced he's damned. I burned a saint, he says over and over. God will never forgive me. He testifies later that for the rest of his life, he has nightmares about that day. About the heart that wouldn't burn. About Joan's voice calling for Jesus. And 25 years later, when the Catholic Church retries Joan's case and declares her innocent, Terrage is brought in to testify. He's an old man now. Broken, haunted, and when they ask him what he believes about Joan of Arc, he says, "She was innocent. She was sent by God. And we murdered her." After the execution, the English take Joan's ashes and throw them into the Seine River. They don't want any relics. No bones, no shrine, nothing. But they can't erase what happened. The story of the heart that wouldn't burn spreads across Europe within weeks. Some call it a miracle. Others call it a curse. But everyone agrees. Something impossible happened that day. In 1456, 25 years after her death, the Catholic Church reopens Joan's trial. They interview hundreds of witnesses. They review the evidence, and they declare the original trial a fraud. Joan of Arc was innocent. The charges were false. The execution was murder. In 1920, nearly 500 years after her death, the same church that burned her as a heretic canonizes her as a saint. Saint Joan of Arc, patron saint of France, patron saint of soldiers. The girl they called a witch is now one of the most revered figures in Christian history. But here's the question that haunts historians to this day. What really happened with her heart? Some say it was a miracle, God's final proof that Joan was his chosen warrior. Others say it was a biological anomaly. Perhaps her heart had calcified or contained minerals that made it resistant to fire. Skeptics say the whole story was invented later, a legend that grew over time. But here's what we know for certain. Multiple witnesses testified under oath that they saw it. The executioner testified about it. Church records reference it. Something happened that day that no one could explain. Joan of Arc lived for 19 years. She led armies for less than 2. She was captured, condemned, and executed in the span of 14 months. And yet, nearly 600 years later, we still tell her story. Because Joan wasn't just a warrior. She wasn't just a martyr. She was a peasant girl who believed in something bigger than herself. Who refused to deny her truth even when the entire world told her she was wrong. Who faced the worst death imaginable with courage and faith. They burned her body 3 times trying to erase her. But legends don't burn, and Joan of Arc became immortal the moment they lit that fire.